Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the future of the water and wastewater industry and the careers you didn't know about. And we are on location at the historic Woodstock Inn in Woodstock, Vermont. And with us is one of the stalwarts of the water industry, and I'm happy to say a good friend of mine for many years, Mr. Jack McManus. Hi, Jack. How are you?
Very good, Dave. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for consenting to sit down and share your words of wisdom. So we have
Wisdom.
many years of experience in the water industry. So I know talking with you over many times and so forth. Tell us a little bit how you got in the water industry.
Well, I went to WPI, Worcester Tech, for engineering, took civil engineering, and as part of that, I took mostly a course in hydraulics and hydrology. They had a laboratory out in Holden, Mass, where I was out there watching and helping with the modeling of different water supply things, erosion on beaches, water hammering pipes, that type of thing. And I really wasn't in the water industry as such, the drinking water industry, that is. Instead, I was really doing engineering. After the military, I went to California and worked out there in the California Water Project, taking the flood waters from the north down to the south. California Aqueduct, 444 miles
Wow.
of aqueduct carrying a lot of water to the south. And I worked on flood control there. And because I came from New England, homesick, got to my family, and we moved back to New York. And in New York, I was working in the conservation department. And as part of that, I happened to run into an individual who was operating the water system in Ithaca, New York, and he asked me if he wanted to take a tour. So I took a tour of the facilities, the treatment plant, the operations center, where they did the pipe work, construction crews, that type of thing. And I thought, what a great job that would be, running a water utility, which was the first time I had thought about it. And the individual, Mr. Gates, who was running the Ithaca supply, kind of brought me involved in that. And so I looked in the Engineering News Record and found out there was an opportunity in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and I applied for it, and I got the job as head of the water supply in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And that's the first I got into the actually drinking water industry. And I tell you, over the years, from that point on, it was a great career. I worked until 1997 when I retired, and I worked part-time. At that time, I worked for the New Britain Water Supply in New Britain, Connecticut.
Yeah.
And the years seemed to go very, very fast. The days maybe took a long time. Each day seemed long, but the years went fast. And I retired. And I'll tell you, everything that I have no regrets. Working in the water industry was extremely rewarding. Met a lot of super persons like yourself. Okay, other people. Sorry, Dave. I just can't eliminate humor from what I talk about. But one of the most important parts of what I did, and again, strictly through luck, in Pawtucket they joined up with the New England Water Works Association and the New England section of the New England section of the American Water Works Association, and they had seminars, and I went to the seminars in Boston. Each month they would have 3 or 4 hours worth of seminars, and learned a great deal about the industry. We also, at that time, had magazines, books, that type of thing. It wasn't like today, where you get everything off your cell phone. The internet didn't exist. You had to go to the library, or you had to pick up stuff through that type of adventure. And they were great adventures in the water industry. I learned a heck of a lot, and working with the American Water Works Association and the Connecticut section later, were extremely beneficial to my career.
Well, when you you said when you first took the Rhode Island job, you had relatively little experience in the water industry.
I basically had no experience. I got the job. I had a great resume. and I remember when I met with the mayor, I met him over 4th of July, over the holiday, to talk about it. And the first thing he looked at me and said, "How old are you?" I was indignant. I was 29 years old. I thought I knew everything. I knew nothing. I learned it all, I hate to say it, on the job, and through the things that I had to do. But every bit of it, the learning, the difficulties, really was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The water organization, especially the Connecticut section and EPA and New England section and so forth, they're a valuable resource for all water operators. So now, when you were in New Britain, were you just in charge of water, or did you do sewer too?
Just water.
Just water.
Yes.
Okay. And how many years tenure did you have in New Britain?
30 years.
Oh, 30 years. You're still on a honeymoon, guys.
Yes, exactly correct. It's a long honeymoon, but a very nice honeymoon.
Well, there you go.
And at that time, there was no EPA, there was no Safe Drinking Water Act, there was
Right.
no Clean Water Act. Essentially, water supply was more of an art than it was a science.
Yep.
They had the U.S. Public Health booklet was put out. It talked about physical things, turbidity, color, iron, manganese, those type of things. But there were no standards. They were guides.
Yeah.
And you were left the superintendent or director or the chief engineer really did most of it himself.
Yep.
He was on his own, except for guidance.
Yeah.
And I have to say that it was at that time more of an art. And later, and I think that when I left the industry, it was more of a science.
Sure.
It actually developed more from an art to a science.
Well, it's amazing. I just retired this year from town of Portland, and with 50 years of service. And
Dave, did anybody notice? Sorry.
But I was asked to, the health department and who's the commissioner of public health, which is her name is Tsunami, and she's actually a forensic scientist. But because of my 50 years in service, they asked. I started at the town of Portland in 1984. Okay, which is basically the same year the Safe Drinking Water Act was instituted. So I had to talk about the Safe Drinking Water Act, but it was one of those things that, when I started, we were a very smaller utility. We had probably 2,300 customers, and the population in the town was like 9,000. So it wasn't a big water utility, but because we were a small water utility, we all had to do everything. You got in the ditches, fixed leaks, you read water meters, you fixed water meters, you rebuilt water meters, you went out and did lead and copper, you did, of course now with the lead and copper rule and the PFAS rule and so forth, forever chemicals, that put a whole new, spin on a lot of the contaminants that, as the water industry evolved, that were required to test for, and I'm sure you saw your share of those as you came through.
Certainly did. And originally, when I was in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, it was not anywhere as sophisticated as it is today. For example, to test for bacteria, they did the multiple tube method, where you took a sample, you diluted it, you put the sample into tubes, you put in a reagent, basically something to make any bacteria grow, and you incubate it for 24 hours, and you got, if there's any gas, you got a presumptive positive.
Yeah.
But you didn't know for sure, so you did another incubation for another 24 hours. And then if it still had some gas in it, if no gas, it meant no bacteria, no coliform bacteria present. But if it had the gas, then you had to confirm it with a reagent that turned it brilliant green.
Yeah.
And at that point, you knew you had bacteria. But it was 72 hours
Sure.
after the fact.
Yeah.
And so what did you do? There were no standards. You looked where the sample came from, and if you had to increase the chlorine, the pre-chlorination or the post-chlorination in the treatment process, or something in the distribution section, you did that. But it was more of an art. You looked at it and see what you had. There were no standards. There was no Safe Drinking Water Act. So you did that. Nowadays, the immediacy of results is overwhelming. It's so fast. Everything is fast speed.
Instant gratification.
Yeah. In my day, it was like a 78 RPM record. It just went slowly.
Well, and not to mention, if you did have a presumptive positive, then you had to go through, depending on what degree it was, your notification process.
That wasn't in the case at the time.
Yeah.
In 1966, when I started in the water industry.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is now.
It is now. Yes. It's altogether different.
Yes.
And I saw that whole change as it took place. A lot of it was difficult to embrace. Some of it was, I thought, unnecessary, but most of it was extremely important.
Sure.
And so you develop with the times.
Yeah.
And I developed with the times. As you can see, I have a lot of gray hair. Actually, Not much gray hair at all.
Well, they call one of the premises that I created this podcast is to try to, the retirement, or we call the bald tsunami, or the gray tsunami, or in our case, the bald tsunami. Okay, people are, basically, the average age of an operator in Connecticut is 53 years old.
Wow.
And 50% of those are eligible to retire, okay, within the next 5 years. So we got to start basically, no pun intended, refilling the pipeline to get those people, in the industry to take our place, to take your place, to take my place, as far as that goes. And so, that's the whole premise. And, me trying to get this awareness out there. I'm distributing this podcast to all of the high school guidance counselors who distribute to, statewide and so forth. But we got to make high school students, college freshmen, aware of the viable careers that are available in this industry. The neat thing about this industry is not something that you can outsource. Okay,
That's true.
You got to have boots on the ground. You got to have you got to get out there, fix the leaks. You got to get out there and do all the the meter reading and sort of that technology is squared away. So from a regulatory standpoint, I'm sure you have some tales of the many iterations of personnel in the state health department. Do tell.
Well, back in the day, I'm talking about when I took over the directorship in New Britain, which was 1969. The health department didn't have a real strong authority. However, they had an individual, a fellow named Dick Woodhull, who really was an excellent administrator and told us the things we should be doing. And it was excellent. I learned so much from him. He came out and met with me when I first got to New Britain, and we went over all of the aspects. Again, no Safe Drinking Water Act at that time. There were not a lot of regulatory things that were going on, and he was trying to develop them. But he and I got together and we worked out things such as watershed surveys and how they should be done, cross-connection control, which is extremely important, especially in a place like New Britain that had industries,
Yes.
had some of their own supplies that were connected for their purposes, for cooling of industrial things and for plating, that type of thing. And we didn't want to have any connection between one and the other, and so we had cross-connection control. So we did a lot of things at that time that were good for the industry, but not necessarily regulated.
Right.
But we did them because they were the right thing to do.
Sure.
And then later, of course, EPA came into being, and the Clean Water Act, then the Safe Drinking Water Act, and a lot of regulations came down the pike. Most of them were pretty simple. They were things that we're already doing.
Right.
But some of them were a little bit more difficult. It cost a few more dollars to do some testing that was not necessarily, as far as I was concerned, important for our particular water supply. But in the general scheme of things, because of the problems that were nationwide,
Sure.
At that time, New Orleans had water they were taking out of the Mississippi River that was deemed inappropriate for the use of drinking water.
Sure.
And the treatment was not sufficient to be able to guarantee that the safety of the people at that time.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing, the impetus that created the Safe Drinking Water Act. And it was the right thing to do. It was the right time. And we had to all learn as we went along.
Yep.
I had to learn, and at that time, I also was very involved with the Connecticut section of the American Water Association, and I was on the Water Utility Council of the association, where its national headquarters were in Denver. Originally, they were in New York. And we actually met with legislators in Washington, along with regulatory agencies, to be able to work out things that were not only good for the industry, but also good for the nation.
Sure.
The Safe Drinking Water Act had a lot of things in it that had to be worked out so that they were things that we could really work with.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so we did that through the Water Utility Council of American Water Works.
Sure.
I also worked on the Standards Council of the National Association, where we had standards for everything from the chemicals we use, aluminum sulfate, chlorination, and the pipes, the different types of classes, pipes of ductile iron and cast iron pipes,
Sure.
meters, and so on. So I worked on the standards. I did that for 8 years and was on the Water Utility Council for 4 years.
Yeah.
As well as being involved with the Connecticut section of the American Water Works and the Connecticut Water Works Association.
Sure.
And those agencies gave a great deal of training.
Sure.
They had lots of stuff for people who were getting into the industry, including myself, which I needed when I first got in because, hate to say it, I didn't know a whole lot, thought I knew everything.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
And so I learned, with the things that are available, if students are thinking about getting into the industry, it's a great time to do it. As you pointed out, a lot of the aging people are going to be retiring.
Yeah.
There are going to be openings. It's been a great career for me. I have no regrets at all. It was a lot of fun, met a lot of super people, learned along with others at the time.
Well, and I think as we all know. I mean, I was fortunate, and I'm sure dealing with the legislators. I don't know. I think your wife is looking for you.
Probably.
I participated in quite a few fly-ins down in D.C. to let legislators know, some of the issues that we had in water, that the bullet points and so forth, the talking points, and because a lot of times these congressmen and senators, they don't know jack.
That's a shame they didn't know jack.
from water department issues and so forth. So we educated them and on laws that we needed and felt we needed to address issues within the industry. I was also fortunate enough to work on the a subcommittee that developed the conservation guidelines, for the National Registry. So I was one of, I think, 14 of us, with Mary Ann Dickerson and some of the other folks that we met and developed those guidelines that are today being used in the Federal Registry. So there's, like I say, there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes, and people don't realize the work that goes in, to the water industry. People take for granted, you open up the faucet and water comes out, but they don't realize what happens, front end of that, making sure that the water is potable, whether it's a groundwater system or whether it's a surface water supplies. Now, New Britain, they had a mixed bag.
Yeah, we had both surface water with several reservoirs as well as well supplies.
Yeah.
So we had a mix, as in Pawtucket. We had surface supplies and we had well supplies. So we had both groundwater and surface water. And we treated them accordingly.
Yeah. Now, when did the health department have break off and developed its water supply section? Do you remember that?
I remember it happening. Don't ask me when it was.
Okay.
It was
because who
fairly early in my career in Connecticut. I worked with Dick Woodhull. He didn't have much of a staff at that time.
Right.
And then he picked up a couple of people, and the staff started increasing. And along with as the Safe Drinking Water Act became law, they had to fund it, and therefore he had more and more people, did more things. But he was a one-man show originally in 1969, and he did a super job. A good example was in our biggest reservoir, 1.3 billion gallons in New Britain. We had an orchard at the far end of it, and he and I went out on a boat and we sampled the soil and the water in that area to see what the DDT runoff which had happened years before, a decade before. And this was well after DDT was banned. And we discovered there were still amounts of DDT in the soil at the end of the reservoir. So it had a half-life of like 10 to 20 years.
Okay.
And so it never really disappeared.
Okay.
It slowly, and that's the type of thing that Dick would do. He would roll up his sleeves and go out, and we'd sit on a boat and we'd actually do the sampling together and do the analysis to determine the safety of the drinking water for New Britain people.
Sure, and that was due to the pesticides they used in the orchards, correct?
Exactly correct.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, again, when you have all these contaminants and, as the years progressed, we're mandated to test for more contaminants. Now we have lead and copper, we have the PFAS, we have arsenic, we have, radon, the whole 9 yards.
In our day, it was parts per million.
Yep.
Which was essentially the standard you could test to.
Yeah.
And now it went to parts per billion, and who knows, it's parts per trillion.
Yeah.
So it's just reached the point where the testing became so sophisticated that they'd be able to find trace amounts that they couldn't find back in the 60s and 70s. They couldn't find certain things at certain levels because it was too low a level. They couldn't test at that sophistication. And now they can test to greater degrees, so we find things that are in the water that existed back in the 60s and 70s, but we didn't know it because we couldn't test to that degree. So we're finding more and more things that are in the water that are not good for people's health. But on the other hand, people are living longer, and there's a good reason for that. Drinking water is much more safe. Especially when it comes from a water supplier.
Absolutely. Now, who succeeded Dick Woodhull where did Ray Jarema come in?
He worked for Dick Woodhull originally. He was his assistant, and they had a couple other people, Bob Rivard.
Okay, I remember Bob,
Bob Rivard, and I don't remember all their names, but Laurie Mathau.
Laurie Mathau.
A lot of great people worked for the health department, and we worked with them. Even though there were requirements, it was more the training, the working with them, the give and take of what we had to do. And it began to change from the art of water supply to the science of water supply. There was much more science in it in the 80s than there was in the 60s, that's for sure.
Wow, unbelievable. That's great. Part of the thing, as far as, as the industry evolves and goes, I think, radon, not radon, but PFAS and so forth, that's more prevalent in obviously the groundwater supplies, but that has to be mitigated now through GAC or whatever method that what method of disinfection we're using in Britain? We're using chlorine.
We did chlorine.
Okay.
Same thing in Pawtucket. It was chlorination, pre-chlorination, post-chlorination. Originally pre-chlorination, you zap that in the water and it came into the treatment facility. And at that time, no one really knew anything about THM, trihalomethanes. We didn't recognize that aspect of it, so you apply chlorine. And a funny story is, and this shows the art of the water supply. In the Pawtucket water supply, they discovered a body in the water of the reservoir. And I went out and looked at the body when they pulled it out, and not something was very nice to see. Basically, the swelling up, the fish did a job on the body, and when they took it out of the water supply, out of the reservoir, it kind of exploded to a certain degree, and a lot of waste material went into the water. So what I did, went to the treatment plant and said, we have to increase the pre-chlorination, which we did. And the next day, the newspapers contacted me and wanted to know what aspect that had to do with our drinking water. And I pointed out that it probably added some deleterious material to our water supply, and so we treated with chlorine. And the newspaper article was very complimentary of the fact that we actually took action. Was it important? Did it really do anything? No, but optics were very important.
Absolutely.
And so it alleviated a lot of people's fears that, oh my God, something bad happened to the drinking water. What did they do about it? We did something. And the chlorination disinfected any of the things in the water that were going to harm people, or the pathogens and so on. And we had, I hate to say it, but fairly heavy pre-chlorination at that time. It was well over a part per million, and it went through the whole treatment process. We had a good treatment facility both in Pawtucket and in New Britain. They had a full water treatment plant, sand filters, along with a large detention basin. It was a good supply. They had problems, like all old systems. They had cast iron pipe. Which
pit cast.
Which pit cast, the old thick pipe. But it rusted away because they didn't do the cement lining until around the 1940s. So a lot of pipe was put in, and it rusted out. So it caused rusty water. What we did was we applied a chemical.
Corrosion control.
Corrosion control, polyphosphate, and it put the iron into solution rather than it held it so it didn't have the negative effects that have when it goes into solution, the red water or the brown water. But we still had a lot of cases of what I consider to be dirty water. We had to embark on a flushing program to flush the hydrants. We also did a lot of cement lining of pipes where they actually take the pipe out of circulation, scrape the barnacles off the inside of it, and go in and do the cement lining inside the pipe,
Yeah.
restoring the pipe, which is what we did rather than replacing it, which would have been a heck of a lot more expensive.
Oh my God, sure.
So we did a lot of that along with the flushing and some chlorination, did chlorination out in the distribution system where we had a big storage basin, around 20 million gallons, and it sat in there. And again, it was one of those kind of things that at that time you didn't think about, short-circuiting.
Right.
So now, as time went on, they realized that the water would short-circuit. And so it would not go through the whole 20 million gallons before it came out. The last in was the first out.
Yep.
So we did things, changed baffling inside those type of basins
Yep.
to allow a full time of the treatment
Contention.
process to take place, the chlorination to take effect before it went to the customers.
Sure.
Rather than having it just run right through the basin.
Right.
It actually followed most of the, it followed a circular way to get out of the basin. So we had more detention time, and I thought that was extremely important.
Sure.
But those are the changes that were being made along the way. Not necessarily mandated, but you realize that that's what you had to do
Absolutely.
to make sure the water was as good as it could possibly be for the people.
Yeah, yeah.
And everybody learned along the way.
Yeah.
From the treatment plant operators to the engineers. It was a great exercise. We had modeling that was done.
Sure.
And one of ours by a consultant who actually did a big, like a pool in his backyard and did different things. So it wasn't modeling through computers, it was modeling actually in place.
Yep, yep.
And so it was a fun type thing. It
Yeah.
was enjoyable. You learned a lot, and you saw what you were doing.
Sure.
Very rewarding. I really enjoyed every bit of what I had to do.
Well, plus, like I say, it's a secure industry. It can be outsourced, and you can make a good living at it.
Exactly. And I look back on the days, the amount of support that I got from the people, the administrators in the State House, in the federal government, and in your own community, the mayors, the board of commissioners.
Yeah.
Those people gave enormous amounts of support to what we were doing.
Right, right.
There was no doing things on the cheap. It was expensive.
Sure.
But good water does cost money.
Well, absolutely. And the thing is that again, as the environmental regulations and so forth become a little bit more stringent, it costs more to test. These tests aren't cheap. As far as that goes, you get to the point where you're testing for PFAS, or you're testing for lead and copper. Look what happened in Michigan. That penny wise and pound foolish out
Talking
there.
about the Milwaukee where they had the cryptosporidium.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking
No,
about the more recent one
yeah.
where the lead.
Yeah,
Get in the water. But without testing every water is not the same.
No.
Water in New England is different than the water out west.
Yeah.
In New England, the big thing is color because you have forested watersheds, and if you have hardwood trees, the leaves fall, and the decay causes a tannic acid that gets into the water, so you have a color.
Yeah.
In the West, they're more concerned with turbidity.
Yep.
They don't have the forested watersheds. They have a lot of silt and that type of thing that gets into the water. So they were more concerned with turbidity.
Yep.
So what applied to the water in New England didn't necessarily apply in Michigan or in Texas. Every water is actually different. They have different characteristics. They have different minerals in the water.
Sure.
They buffer differently. If they've got more hardness or softness, well water in the groundwater is a lot different than surface water.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks water is water. It's not.
Yeah.
And the more you get into it, the more you find the details of it.
Sure.
Just like a snowflake.
Yeah.
No two are the same.
No two are the
Because
same.
of the mineral content.
Yeah.
They freeze a different way. Water supply is no different. So what applies in one place doesn't always apply in another.
Well, and being in New Britain, I'm sure you knew exactly when the reservoir was going to turn over
Yes.
in the spring and in the fall.
That's correct.
You
And
know.
when it did, you knew the characteristics of the water coming into the plant were going to be different, had to be treated differently.
Yeah.
Jar tests were done in those
Yeah.
days. You applied different types of aluminum sulfate, different amounts, and decided which one with that water would do the best job for sedimentation. So it was, again, an art as well as a science.
So, wow, okay. So, obviously, we're here in Vermont with our fun group. You're part of the fun group. So, did you enjoy your stay up here?
I enjoyed it very much.
Oh, it was
I've been out of the industry for over 25 years.
Yep.
I basically retired in 1997, worked for another 3 years, so I worked until around 2000, 2001. So it's been 23 years since I've been out of the industry, but I stayed in touch with a lot of fun people, a lot
Yeah.
of people over the years that I enjoyed things with, including yourself. Okay. Dave and I go back a long ways. I was on the committee when he was doing the conservation. But one of the things I remember him most about was we had a board of directors meeting and he was at it, and he started talking about computers, and he started talking about domains, and this was back. I hate to say it was in the '60s because it wasn't. It was more recent. But it was when you didn't know what a domain was, and he was talking about taking the domains and make sure we had one that had Connecticut Waterworks in it or that type of thing. And it was only like $10 or $15 to secure a domain. And I listened to him for a while and I said, my God, there's a whole aspect of this that I don't even understand. And Dave was ahead of the curve, super on the computers and that type of thing. And we backed up and we bought the domains.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you about that and learning from you.
Well,
And so even though I kid him a lot about a lot of things, I learned a great deal about the computerization that you've been involved in. And podcasts like this, I don't know very much about, but I took part.
You did. I appreciate it, Jack. And so I know your lovely wife Erica is with you. So tell me what you do for hobbies? I know you have a place in Rhode Island. You have a place down south.
I have a place in Florida also.
Okay.
So I go south in the summer, in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And
You're a snowbird.
Follow the sun. Yeah. Come back up here and enjoy a place. I have a beach place in Rhode Island. Up until a couple of years ago, I played golf pretty regularly and tennis, but. Unfortunately, a number of medical setbacks have pushed me so that I'm not able to do some of those things. I can still play a little bit of bocce, and I play cards, and I do that type of thing, spend time on the computer playing computer games, go to the beach.
There you go.
No more surfing. I had a surfing accident several years ago, smashed my face and got a stinger. People have a lot of photographs of me coming out of the water with blood all over me, and of course they use them against me. I've had a very fun time. I've skied. I've done all kinds of things. I skied expert slopes. I don't do that anymore. I enjoy the memories of things I used to do.
Well, that's half the battle. Memories is what we have, and again, Jack, I appreciate you taking time. I know you were reluctant to sit this down, but and to do this, but for posterity's sake, and getting your story told, and that's it's basically a kind of an oral history that of a person that's been a major part of the industry. You've been a major mentor to me throughout the years and stuff that I've learned. Also, all of your comic relief and your monologues at the annual conferences. Those are memories that I'll always cherish. So.
I did a lot of Don Rickles type stuff where I picked on people.
Yep.
Every bit of it was in fun. I know I picked on you. I usually pick on people of a higher rank. I don't pick on just ordinary people. If it's somebody who's the president of a water utility or someone that comes to us from national, I consider those people vulnerable to jokes.
Sure,
and
why not?
Over the years, that has been the case. I made fun of it. I think that you have to have a lot of humor
Absolutely.
in dealing with the stresses you have in the job.
Yeah.
And humor is the best way to fight against stress. Stress is a killer.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm the type of person who doesn't take stress, I give it. And that's the way it is. And I think some of my wife and children will tell you the same thing, that, he is a stress giver.
Now, how many children do you have now,
I have
Jack?
5 kids.
You have 5 kids.
5 wonderful kids, all married. They got kids. I've got 14 grandchildren and a bunch of great-grandkids. I have mostly granddaughters, one new great-grandson rather, another grandson on the way in June. So a huge family. We get together every year. It's a McManus reunion. We take pictures. It's hard to get all of us together.
At one time.
They're spread across the country.
Yeah.
They all come back for the McManus vacation week. It's a great thing. I've been blessed. I have a great family. I have super children. They all went to college. They all have jobs. They have living an independent life. I couldn't be prouder of them.
And they're not living in your basement.
They are not. That's correct. Some of them actually have done better than I have done, which is excellent. what I want them to do.
Well, you done good, Jack. You done good. So again, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, that concludes this episode of the future of the water and wastewater industry and the careers you didn't know about. And in the house with us at the historic Woodstock Inn in Woodstock, Vermont, is Mr. Jack McManus, who is a retired water and sewer water director from the city of New Britain and multiple other places that have served nationally in the industry and is well known. Jack, thank you so much. Have safe travels.
Thank you very much, Dave.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
All right.